The Bajau are a unique people who've long lived in the middle of the ocean, outside the borders of any state. These sea nomads have lived off the coasts of Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines for centuries. As a result, the Bajau are not recognized by any state and have no citizenship, and thus no rights to live on land. Yet these people gather in communities, sometimes on tiny islands, to hone their maritime hunting skills that have been passed down from generation to generation for over 1,000 years. Usually, these people live in small houseboats and traditionally come ashore only to trade supplies or seek shelter from storms. But Bajau don't just spend their entire lives on the water, they're also very good at being under it. They're known as some of the world's best freedivers because they rely on this skill to hunt, that is, to survive. Using the traditional techniques, Bajau repeatedly dive, spending about 8 hours a day underwater. A dive can last from 30 seconds to several minutes, and Bajau can dive more than 230 feet deep. Submersing like this is only possible using a wooden mask or goggles and a weight belt. And guess what? That's not the most amazing thing. Bajau feel just as comfortable underwater as most people on land. They walk on the seabed and have complete control over their breathing and body and have no problem catching fish on the first try. It's all about evolutionary adaptations. Humans have a reaction that's triggered by holding breath and being submerged in water. Your heart rate slows down, the blood vessels in your extremities get smaller to conserve oxygenated blood for your vital organs, and then your spleen contracts. The spleen is a reservoir for oxygenated red blood cells, so when it contracts, it gives you an oxygen boost. It's like a biological built-in scuba tank. Meanwhile, Bajau, who are inextricably linked to water, have managed to grow a spleen larger than other people's. And when I say larger, I mean larger by 50%. Not just the Bajau who dive regularly have an enlarged spleen, even those Bajau who don't do that have a spleen larger than average. That is, this increase is not just a consequence of regular diving, but something that's emerged as a result of evolution. According to researchers, Bajau diverged from their closest non-diving relatives about 15,000 years ago. That was enough to adapt to life on the water. And sometimes, Bajau also rupture their eardrums at an early age to make diving easier. Just to be clear, don't do that. Actually, studying Bajau is very useful, not only because they're people of a unique culture and all that sort of thing. Recent genetic studies show that these sea nomads may be the key to understanding how man's body reacts to extreme conditions. Certain diseases, including strokes and heart attacks, deprive the body of oxygen. So the genetic tricks that help Bajau survive underwater may inspire new ways to protect people on land. By the way, scientists are studying the genes of the people of Tibet and Ethiopia who live at high altitudes for the same reason. Let's admit the obvious. If you and I climb to a high altitude, our bodies will immediately start objecting to such treatment. We'll be out of breath and may even get altitude sickness. After spending some time in such conditions, the body will try to compensate for this and start producing more red blood cells. But since we aren't adapted to the high-altitude environment, the body's reaction will be maladaptive. It will produce too many red blood cells, making the blood thicker than it needs to be. Thick blood means high blood pressure, which in turn means the risk of stroke. But the people of Tibet aren't even bothered by this thanks to their special adaptation. They produce fewer red blood cells when they climb to higher altitudes. Apparently, they have to thank the gene inherited from an extinct human species, the Denisovans. At some point, our ancestors interbred with the Denisovans, and some of their DNA ended up in various Asian populations. And then apparently the ancestors of modern Tibetans moved to a higher altitude where the inherited gene was activated. Natural selection came into play, and as a result, 87% of Tibetans today have the Denisovan gene. It literally ensured their survival. This all is certainly very exciting. Tens and hundreds of thousands of years ago, ancient humans of every possible species walked on our planet. But in the end, evolution left only us, Homo sapiens. The question of how it happened and how humans became humans has been a long-standing mystery that scientists and anthropologists tried to wrap their minds around for centuries. Recent research suggests that all modern humans descended from a small group of African pioneers who left the continent at some point in our prehistory. This group was adapted to life on the tropical savanna, and these people encountered a number of problems during their migration. Well, you can imagine extreme temperatures, new diseases. Also at that time, the world was already inhabited by other human groups such as Neanderthals and Denisovans. When our ancestors encountered them, they interbred and acquired DNA of groups that were already adapted to life on new continents. So it turned out that each new generation of descendants was only better adapted to the new conditions. And by the way, it's not only Tibetan people who've learned to survive high in the mountains. On tops of the Himalayas, members of the Nepalese ethnic group are famous for their records in speed climbing, ascents of routes no one else has climbed, and other skills. These extraordinary people are called Sherpas. But what helps them be so successful at conquering any heights? A recent study suggests it's their ability to harness oxygen better than anyone else. At altitudes above 1.5 miles, oxygen levels become very low and can cause a range of problems for those who aren't used to such thin air. Symptoms such as headaches, low appetite, and difficulty sleeping can await those who dare climb too high. In severe cases, altitude sickness can even cause cerebral or pulmonary edema. These conditions are potentially deadly. Sherpas, like Tibetan people, produce fewer red blood cells at higher altitudes. But it's not just that. Sherpas' muscles are built differently than those of people living on the plains. They can turn more oxygen into energy. And while some amazing people are fine with conditions that would surely be fatal for us, others stick to a diet that could kill anyone at all. If we decided to adopt the eating habits of the Inuit, we'd regret this very quickly. Imagine a diet extremely low in plants but high in fats from fish and mammals. Your blood vessels would be begging for mercy. But the Inuit are fine with their diet, and that's assuming they eat almost no fruits or vegetables because of their cost. This is an unaffordable luxury for those who live in remote Arctic regions. Yet the Inuit have long adapted to such a life and have several variants of unique genes that are responsible for fatty acid metabolism. Simply put, their mutations protect them against cardiovascular disease and diabetes. They also have a significant effect on growth. The Inuit are shorter. But all of this is nothing compared to the ability to live a healthy life on such a limited diet. Apparently, these mutations have been beneficial to the Inuit for at least 20,000 years, and may have helped many groups of people adapt to the hunter-gatherer diet full of meat and fat. Yes, it's a prime example of how evolution works. If you gotta eat walrus, it has to make sure it benefits your body. How do you survive without fruits and vegetables if you're not an Inuit? Take vitamin A, for example, which is vital for eyes and bones. The urban population gets it from colorful plant foods like carrots. Turns out that vitamin A is also abundant in the fats of cold water fish and marine mammals, as well as in animal liver. Vitamin D stimulates bone growth and is also found in the mentioned foods. People living in temperate and tropical climates usually get this vitamin through sunlight and cow's milk. As for vitamin C, its source in the diet of northern peoples has long been a mystery. If we don't have enough of this vitamin, we would get scurvy, a terrible connective tissue disease. Turns out vitamin C can also be obtained from animal foods. Raw caribou liver, seal brains, raw kelp. These foods contain very little vitamin C, but still enough to prevent a deadly disease. So we looked at those who live on the water and under it. We've also seen those who were able to settle high in the mountains, or even those who have adapted to the harsh north climate. It's about time we checked out the trees. Can you imagine living more than 100 feet high in a tree? It's pretty uncomfortable, but not for the people of the Korowai tribe. This tribe is the only known group of people on Earth who settle in tree houses. And this decision actually makes sense given the terrain. There are frequent floods in the area, and the number of insects is just off the charts, which makes it a nasty, dangerous place to live. Though home is still home. So the Korowai started building houses in the trees, and originally they also served as protection against the attacks of rival clans, seeking to capture people for slavery or even cannibalism. There's another theory which, however, builds upon the previous ones. For centuries, the Korowai upheld the traditional belief that their deceased ancestors could return to the land of the living at any time. So they built these dwellings high above the ground to protect themselves from evil spirits. In short, a treehouse protects against everything. These houses take just a couple of weeks to build, and the Korowai don't use helmets or other protective equipment. Maybe it's all about some evolutionary adaptation that helps them climb and not fall. Alas, no one studied the tribe from that angle, so we can't say if they are different in terms of physiology. But there's another example. The Twa people are hunter-gatherers who live in the rainforests of southwestern Uganda and regularly climb trees in search of food. They are remarkable climbers, capable of climbing high into the tops of trees without ropes to collect honey. Researchers filmed these people to see the biomechanics of their amazing climbing abilities, and they unexpectedly found out that the Twa could bend their ankles to the limit, bringing their shins closer to the tree. This is roughly what wild chimps do. In normal humans, this kind of ankle flexing can cause injury or bone fracture, but the Twa have longer fibers in their calf muscles, and this results in a simply phenomenal talent for climbing. So maybe the Korowai possess a similar quality. Oh, I almost forgot. When we talked about the Bajau, I think I had to mention the Moken people. Deep in the island archipelagos in the Andaman Sea and along the west coast of Thailand live small Moken tribes, also known as sea nomads. Their children spend most of the day at sea diving for food, a task made easier by the fact that they can see underwater. Surely any of you tried opening your eyes underwater at least once, which means you know that without special goggles it's pretty damn blurry down there. But an experiment has shown that Moken children have an amazing ability to see underwater twice as well as, say, European children. How's this possible? To see well on land, you need to be able to refract the light that enters your eyes onto your retina. Light refracts when it enters the human eye because the outer cornea contains water. The water makes the cornea a little denser than the air outside the eye. An internal lens refracts light even better. But when the eye is immersed in water, which has about the same density as the cornea, we lose the cornea's refractive power. The image becomes severely blurred. Moken children, however, can constrict their pupils and change the shape of the lens. Seals and dolphins have a similar adaptation. Alas, none of the adult Moken could boast the same ability. Their lenses prove to be less flexible. But does this mean that Moken children have some kind of genetic anomaly? Nope. To test this, scientists asked European children to participate in training sessions in which they dived underwater and tried to determine the direction of lines on a card. After 11 sessions across 1 month, the children attained the same underwater acuity as the Moken children. So it's just a matter of habit. The only difference was the red eyes observed in European children because of the salt in the water. Apparently, the Moken do have a certain evolutionary adaptation, but it has nothing to do with the lens. Well, speaking of vision, it's worth saying that some Aboriginal people in the Australian outback can have more than 4 times sharper vision than non-Indigenous people. They can see things that are 4 times smaller than what most people are able to see. Yes, people with the world's best eyesight are living somewhere in Australia. The reasons why they have supersight are not fully understood, but they probably have to do with evolutionary demands over the millennia. After all, a hunter-gatherer needs good eyesight to be able to see a kangaroo lying in the shade or find a water hole or something else like that. In short, it's an ability crucial for survival. Perhaps it was the supersight that made the Aborigines such good astronomers. Actually, the Aborigines of Australia have a long relationship with the stars. Knowledge of the constellations was part of their culture and has been passed down from generation to generation. There's evidence that hints of astronomy being practiced in this region thousands of years before Stonehenge was built. But what does that have to do with sharp eyesight? It's quite simple. When modern explorers studied the records of the 1840s, which contained Aboriginal descriptions of constellations, they couldn't figure them out. It wasn't until scientists picked up binoculars that they discovered the missing stars. The same stars the Aborigines could see with the naked eye. Feel the difference? Well, with eyes like that, how could they not gaze at the stars back when mankind was still young? See you later.